Okay, welcome to today's final session. I hope you had a good day so far, that you have felt like you made progress with your trips, as well as enjoyed the campus tour and the career workshop. So we continue today on the theme of, or in this session on the theme of transversal skills. So this builds very nicely on Minna's career workshop that we had in the previous session. And we have a panel on transversal skills. It is my great pleasure to introduce you a number of colleagues. I mean, obviously, some of them you've already met in the context of this METEOR program, and I will ask the participants to, or the panelists to introduce themselves in just a moment. I've prepared a few questions for the panel, but if we have time, I'm hoping that we can have some questions from the audience at some point as well. Maybe we can just go in the order that we have the panelists here. Johanna, would you like to introduce yourself? Just very briefly at this point, and then we'll go, after that, we'll just go straight to questions.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for inviting here. So I'm Johanna Annala, research professor in higher education pedagogy here at the University of Jyväskylä in the Finnish Institute for Educational Research. And my background is in researching curriculum changes, and I think that has also this feature of competence, the question of competencies in relation to knowledge and the tasks of a purpose of university. Now it stops that now it's time to stop, I think. It seems to be. Okay, but just to say something about a little bit of my perspective. I've been teaching something like 15 years at Tampere University, faculty members in university pedagogy. So also that's like one perspective, and also I have supervised, I have around 5 PhD researchers under my supervision at the moment.
Thank you. Patty, would you introduce yourself next?
Yes, my name is Petty Nijhuis. I'm a postdoc at the university, specifically at the Center of Excellence for Music, Mind, Body and Brain, and my expertise is in rhythm perception and production, and I'm here because I take part in the JYU mentoring program for postdocs.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Has anybody seen the mentoring training resource on the platform? Hands up. Excellent, thank you. So those of you who have seen that know that there is a small podcast about the JYU mentoring program. And if you haven't listened to it yet, I warmly recommend. Ian, would you introduce yourself next?
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Ian Moore. I'm originally from the UK. I've been in Finland for, I don't know, over 20 years. I am a physicist, so I'm a professor in physics, which is on the other side of the lake. I'm also involved in the JYU mentoring scheme. And let's see, this year I now have a new position in the university, so I'm the director of the Accelerator Laboratory, which is the biggest infrastructure basically in Finland, located on the other side of the lake. So.
Okay, and then Josephine.
Hello, my name is Josephine. I am based in the Department of Teacher Education. I'm a senior lecturer there, and I also came from the UK over 20 years ago when we meet for the first time now. Although my background, I came to Finland as a subject teacher, I found myself working with people from all different kinds of backgrounds. My PhD supervisor was a professor of maths and physics education, which came as something of a surprise to me. Maybe I was a surprise to him as well, I don't know. And then I had the pleasure of working with some music colleagues, but just because of maybe the life I lead, I've been involved in quite a lot of intercultural education and different intercultural projects, European Erasmus Plus projects, and had the privilege of working with colleagues from different disciplines, from different European universities. And it's a pleasure to be able to then share something of that with you today.
And Josephine is one of our METEOR mentors. And maybe she will be mentoring one of your groups. We do not know yet, because the groups will only be signed after all the academies are finished, so in a couple of weeks' time. And then last but not least, Bahadir.
I'm Bahadir, I'm from Turkey. So my background is actually chemistry and also computer applications and the coding. But I had a PhD on physics, quantum mechanics, and those kind of calculations, quantum mechanical calculations. So I'm very happy to see him here as a physicist. So I have another experiences, but I will talk about later at the experience section, actually. So I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. And as you already know, Bahadir is also one of the METEOR mentors who's been facilitating our work here. You come from very kind of like different positions and different backgrounds and also different kind of like career stages and different roles. But I was wondering, I mean, most of the questions here will be like, drawing from your experiences and your opinion. So there's no need to think about like, what would research say about this? Unless, of course, you're familiar with the research, then you'll also speak from that perspective. But I'd like you to kind of like first reflect upon what do you see as essential transversal skills for doctoral researchers and early career researchers, and why? Why do you think that, that's important? Do you want to go in an order, or do you just want to kind of like raise a hand and...
You are the host, so you can...
Okay, okay, in that case, let's go with Bahadir first, and then we do kind of this way.
Okay. So I have some notes about that, actually, but I'm going to talk about my perspective, from my perspective, actually. So the communication skill is very important for me.
You have to speak very close to the microphone.
Communication skills is important for me, I think, for the transversal skills for the PhD students, because everything you do is the talking to people or listening to the people or representing yourself. So you need a good communication skills. Not everyone has this one, as me, because my communication skills was not so good at the beginning, because I was a nerd kind of guy at that time. But when you start talking to people and expressing yourself, it's getting better. And the other one is the research skills, which is also very important. You have to know the methodology, and you have to know some analyzing techniques and those kind of stuff also. And the other one is collaboration. I'm a very multidisciplinary guy, so I worked in very different areas, from chemistry to economics to biodiversity. So the collaborating with others are very important. So that's my perspective. This three is very important for me. So.
Okay.
When I was thinking about this question earlier on, and I was making a little list for myself, and one of the things I noticed was that I had a lot of dichotomies. So on the one hand, it's the capacity to listen, just as you were saying, but then it's also the capacity to be able to share your perspective. I was thinking you need to have both of these. Being able to listen, super important, but then at some point you have to be able to sort of step in and share your part as well. And with that, I also had the capacity to build relationships, to be interested in others, but also to be independent, to not over-rely on others, so that you can appreciate what others bring, what others have to share, different kinds of expertise. But then you also recognize that you have something to bring, some kind of expertise, some kind of interest, some kind of questions. Actually, asking questions, I think, is a very important skill or quality or just action that young researchers can take, to keep asking questions as to why is it like this, and to pursue different kinds of answers to those questions. And of course, asking questions also involves some kind of risk, because asking questions means that you're usually not quite sure of the answer. You don't know what the answer is going to be. So that capacity to take risks, I think, is also an important part of being a researcher. There is some kind of basis that you're building on, but nevertheless you have to risk not knowing in order to be able to know something more. Yeah, they were my thoughts.
Thank you. So now the interesting bit is like, whether we have any sort of a convergence and understanding in the JWU mentoring program. Ian and Patty.
Yeah, so I I think I really like the bit about not knowing. Because if you think you know everything, you are so far from knowing. It's, so we shouldn't kid ourselves. I mean, I sit here now, and actually yesterday when I was looking through the questions, the first thing I did was Google, what are these transversal skills? To try to get an idea. What does AI tell me? And then I have students in the office next to me, and I went into their office, and I said, so I need, from your perspective, tell me something about what transversal skills would be very useful. And so from a research perspective, I know that at least in our university, our PhD students are forced to take certain credits that many people recognize, communication and presentation skills. They take credits on open science, so there's a lot of now discussion about metadata and publishing and blah, blah, blah. And I think they also, yeah, so I've said communication, research ethics is one. But these are kind of just a few credit courses. And then I kind of realized that the things that we're discussing now about being able to communicate, being able to ask questions, this is not taught. And I realized when I did my PhD, I didn't have any transversal skills offered to me. And I'm thinking, wow, this is wonderful. However many years later, there's all of these potential options. So where have I learned them? And I've realized I've learned them just through experience. I've learned them through making apparent mistakes. I say apparent mistakes because so many of us are afraid of being wrong. And so we choose not to speak up, or we're afraid of failure. And these are just concepts that we kind of hold really tightly to, and somehow they're buried in ourselves. And I don't know where they come from, and I don't want to use bad words or anything like this, but we should somehow get rid of this idea that, you know, we are afraid of asking questions. So communication is really important, and having the courage to do it. And I think if you find in your own research groups at home, if one person has the courage, you will help facilitate discussion with other people. So this is maybe a transferable skill that I'm not sure how it is to teach it, because my students said, you know, they'd be willing to take courses that are more evidence-based and objective rather than subjective, because they're worried about, well, if I do more courses, it'll take time out of my research studies. So I could list things like time management, project management. And these, I think, are things that would be wonderful if, as an early stage researcher, you would have. But I also think that professors need time management. So we all struggle with these same things. But I think facilitating this discussion, I think, is a wonderful opportunity to realize that, okay, we might come from different backgrounds, but potentially there is key things like not knowing communication and so on that is very helpful. So.
Thank you. And then Patty, you took part in the JYU mentoring program. Did you have the sort of transversal skills in mind, and what kind and why?
Well, when it comes to mentoring programs, I honestly don't think they do much for transversal skills, because I don't believe that many of these skills mentioned, as well as the ones that I considered most important, like analytical thinking, problem solving, that you can use in everyday life, they're not skills that you, as Ian said, take a course in, you tick it off, I've mastered this. They're things that you continue to learn every day, every challenge, and they require adapting to every challenge. And so I don't think I would go into any program expecting me to teach such a skill, as I think that's where we converge on, that it's very difficult to teach such skills. But where I see the value in such programs is the connection with your peers. While that may not be necessarily mentoring, it is a peer network for support, where you can look at how other people manage their time or solve their problems. And you can observe how people do this and what maybe suits you best in taking from everyone's different experiences. So that would be my answer to the specifically for a mentoring program.
Thank you. Then Johanna, what does it look from your perspective?
Okay, I think it's quite easy to continue from here, because I think we are somehow going to a conclusion or have same kind of ideas through same kind of examples. So I also agree that transversal skills are not something that we could teach as separate of something, as a specific course, for example, of interaction without connection to the knowledge. So transversal skills are always connected to the knowledge and the field of science and the discipline, what you are studying, the research, what you are doing in that sense. And I give a few examples. One is like that, if we think about critical thinking or literacy skills, you always need to connect that in a way that you have some kind of piece of knowledge, and is there another competing theory, another competing research? What part of bigger entity is this piece of knowledge, and so on. So it's always somehow related to the thing what we are doing, not as a separate critical thinking in some kind of like separate from that. And also another thing is this being good in social interaction as such. Well, we can talk a lot to each other about nonsense. It could be nonsense, but learning to talk with people from the same field of science, using the scholarly concepts and language and sharing ideas in a higher and higher kind of more theoretical level with our colleagues, then changing and your perspective and communication to discuss with journalists or general public. And also, I don't know if this is a kind of like general competence or what to teach things, but if you plan a career in the university, most of the positions are teaching positions. Also, professor position is a teaching position. So then also you should learn how to communicate very complicated things also to students. So they are always somehow, these things are connected, these transversal skills to the thing what you are doing research, what is your specific field where you are working.
I love the fact that we have such a breadth of different understandings of in a way, what is a transversal skill? Like, you know, whether you focus on the types of kind of, in a way, more utilitarian approaches like project management or time management, or if you think of, for example, the training resources there on the learning platform, we have this sort of these sort of specific ones related to project management or applying for funding or you know, intercultural communication. But on the other hand, we have really very kind of like profound, in a way, human skills that some of you raised, like listening or voicing your own thoughts. So there is a very different. There are very different ways of conceptualizing what transversal skills are, and none of them are more right or more wrong. Some of them you can take a course on project management. Whether it makes sense, you know, in some cases it does make sense, in some cases it doesn't. But then, you know, this sort of listening is a much, much harder course to plan or teach or to take. Maybe the next we could reflect upon sort of experiences that you have had in where you yourselves might have learned transversal skills, or in case, you know, you feel like there have been sort of situations in which you have been teaching them. It would be nice to hear experiences. We don't have to go in any particular order. You can just say that I would like to say something. If nobody volunteers, then I will, you know. Patty, please.
Yeah, I will elaborate a little bit maybe on what I thought was most important, this problem-solving skill, which is for life and all jobs outside of academia as well. This analytical thinking of being able to break something down in its subcomponents, right? If for the very first time someone tells you to design an experiment, this is an overwhelming task, but to be able to see where should I start? What are the parts that make this up, and with which part should I start? What knowledge am I missing? What can I teach myself, right? And what do I need help with? That is, I think, the key to solving any problem. And I feel fortunate enough that I'm at a stage in my career and life where I feel quite confident that no matter the problem, if given enough time, I can solve it. And I think that is one of the key components of being successful. Also from research, we know this as like self-efficacy, that having faith in your own abilities is like the most determinant thing. And when it comes to learning this, I think, as I mentioned before, in watching other people do this, in having my supervisors in a moment where I'm overwhelmed help me through what parts do we have and where should we start is helpful. But even more helpful, I find now that I supervise my own students, that I have to help them do that, really sharpens my skills there. I think even more than just observing other people do it, in having to help others. So I think that, as you mentioned, teaching is a big part of any future position in academia, but I think teaching and supervising is also a great resource for yourself to learn more.
Anybody else want to pick up from that?
So as Ian pointed that, when I was in my PhD situation, I didn't think about the transversal skills. Actually, I didn't know that. I didn't have a checklist for improve my transversal skills. But now I understand. I got those experience or those skills while I was doing my PhD or working at the university, teaching, collaborating with others. So it came up now, naturally. But I just want to say the best transversal skill I had is learning by myself. Because my supervisors, actually, I had 2 in my PhD. Thanks to them. They are not so, old school teachers or old school supervisors. They are like mentors. They just say, okay, we need to do this one. And go and find something, go find how to do it. And I went, I came back, asked something if I need, but they left us free. So with my other colleagues, other students of the supervisor. So that's very helped me for project management actually, because we designed everything as an experiment or the computational methods we have used. We designed our computational algorithms and stuff, or writing codes for them. They helped us, our supervisors, but they really helped us to improve our project management and self-learning, self-mentoring thing. So that's the best part of my transversal skills, and that's why I got them. But I realized them, not now, but I realized them after I got my maybe associate professorship. I didn't have a list or checklist for the transversal skills before.
Johanna would like to pick up from that.
So thanks. I think this question that many of you have said that I have never been taught them and there is no boxes to click. But in a way that when I think about supervision as a process or supervision as a product, I think there is quite traditional way of thinking doctoral supervision in a way that supervisor and supervisee both focus on the product, the article, the results or something, and we finalize and rewrite that section, and we are all the time doing that. But thinking of supervision as a process where supervisor tries to give responsibility, give agency to the supervisee so that how am I able to do it? So supporting that process and also making that perhaps like saying aloud that this is the reason why I'm not giving you the right answers straight away. This is learning to be a scientist or researcher that you need to have some autonomy. But somehow that thinking of these things from the supervisor and supervisee perspective may be helpful, but also thinking of like understanding, okay, this is why I am not. It may be like lack of support, and it shouldn't be lack of support, but in a way that if supervisor also says that, okay, this is the reason, now I give you few steps, and this is the next thing to do, and so on. And I'm supporting you, but you really need to have take your own responsibility and be like try something, even though it doesn't work, but encouraging for that, and also to make mistakes. I think that's quite important way of also learning this type of skills, which then transfer to other contexts too.
Thank you. Would Ian or Josephine want to pick up from there?
Yeah, I've been thinking of an example of somehow where I think maybe I've learned some transversal skills. And I think one of the examples has been in actually writing applications with other people. And applications are one of those things that come into your life as a doctoral student or a postdoc or just as a member of academic staff, and you can try to avoid them, but maybe you shouldn't, and taking on the challenge. But I've noticed that in writing applications, it's wonderful to be able to share the work with others because they tend to grow. But to be able to share that work, it really requires time to kind of get to, know how other people communicate and what's important to them, but also to develop that shared idea, which is maybe what you've also been experiencing this week, that you really need to have that somehow shared focus, and a shared focus only really comes over time. And at first you can think, we've got this, we see this together, and then something comes up in the conversation and you realise that actually we're looking at this from another perspective. And it can be a bit of a shock, because maybe you've started to invest in the idea as you understood it already, and now there's going to be some kind of shift or change. And so then how do you deal with that shift or change and that kind of uncomfortable feeling? Is this something now that's worth holding on to? Can I try to encourage the group to hold on to it as it was? Or am I willing to now see where this new idea goes? And I personally sometimes need a little bit of time to get over the shock and the surprise, and then I can become quite excited about another idea as well. But it isn't always easy to do that, to let go. And so also for myself, I would say not being overly defensive in a moment of shock has been quite important as well. And if somebody sees or asks what I experience as quite a tough question that I wasn't anticipating, how in that moment when I feel quite vulnerable do I deal with that as well? That I kind of have the courage to say, okay, well, I really don't know at this moment in time, but thank you for the question, I'll think about it. And daring to think about it and to then be able to come back to the situation. So, I've found that it really helps to somehow invest something into the relationship with the people that you're working closely with. I don't mean that you become best friends, I don't mean that they're there at the Christmas dinner table with you, but somehow that you can understand a little bit more how other people work, you can laugh together, you can kind of share frustrations together, and then you can focus and invest together. They were the experiences that came to mind.
Thank you. Ian, do you want to continue?
Maybe I can just pick up on that.
You have to hold the microphone very close to sound brilliant.
Yeah, so maybe I can just pick up on that point, because perhaps again that I have not taught transversal skills, and maybe I have learned them through my experiences, and maybe kind of as a supervisor, although it's not a role that we get imposed on us. I think as you just go through your PhD, you get to the postdoc level. As a postdoc, you may be applying for grants, and then suddenly you have a grant for a PhD student, and all of a sudden you have a student, and you have to supervise them. And then it's like, well, where are the skills for the supervisor? How do I communicate with my student? How do I be the best supervisor that I can? And then if you are supervising many students, which I have, and then you start to realize it is really about, the hardest thing for me in physics is actually working with people. The physics is the easy part, but actually the working with people is the most.
For some of you, it's the easiest part.
But the most rewarding part is working with people, and yet that can be the most challenging part, because when I came into kind of my group, I realized, oh my goodness, I cannot stand programming. I am terrible at it. I do everything to avoid it, and then I cannot stand designing. And I'm looking at all of these great people at what they do and realizing, well, where are my skills? Apparently I do physics and I don't like maths and things like this. And then I realized, okay, actually I have some skills, because I can see that each of these people in the team have a unique thing to offer. And as long as I can see that, I can get the best out of them. And then, of course, I look at what skills I have and realize I don't have to be the best programmer in this. And I realize that my students are, in fact, my teachers. So most recently, I have had 2 students. One is extremely selfless. He was in the lab doing everything for everybody, apart from his own PhD work. And one, I don't want to say that they were selfish, but they were fixated on what they had to do. There was a kind of panic, I must do this. And, they would get as much help as possible, but they wouldn't give help. And as a supervisor, I have these fearful extremes because I know I have to give advice to one of them, which is you need to learn how to be a bit more selfish. But let's not use the word selfish because it's negative. So maybe you just need to prioritize a little bit yourself, which may lead on to a question later, which is what advice I will give, is like how to say no, how to set boundaries. If, as a student, you are not able to speak to your supervisor, I think it's important to have the communication. It's important to not be afraid and to try to say what it is that you need. Firstly, you have to ask yourself what it is that I need. And, we get all emotional and afraid of things, so take a breath, pause, and just figure out what do I need to support where I'm going. And also look at the supervisor and realize most of the time, I hope, the supervisor is also a human being. And they may be wondering exactly the same thing. How do I give the student or the postdoc what it is that they need? Because they may not have been taught how to do this, but they find themselves in a supervisory role, which means responsibility, which means suddenly working out how to gain these skill set by doing the job and making mistakes and sometimes failing, but whatever that means, it's a challenge, but through challenge we have growth. So I think, again, it comes back to kind of communication on both ways. And also, if you're in an international group, learning the nuances of different cultures. I can say, being British, although I've been outside of the UK for so long, I realized that many people in the UK, when they are afraid of saying what needs to be said directly. So they kind of skirt around the topic using flowery language. And they even do that writing references. And so I will have somebody call me up from the Netherlands asking about a reference in the UK, saying, what does this really mean? Oh, you have to read between the lines. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, so every culture has our own nuances and things. And if in an international working atmosphere, it's good to also realize that and try to get to know your colleagues and not be afraid of asking questions.
There were a couple of things that really sort of caught my ear there, and one of them was this sort of learning by doing, sort of gaining a set of skills by doing something different. And as you know, this is at the core of how we do things in METEOR, and the core structure in how we do things is the peer mentoring groups. So some of you are more familiar with the METEOR program than the others. The whole METEOR program is built around this idea that our wonderful participants, of whom there are almost 300 around Europe, only some of them are here, some of them are participating in the other METEOR academies in the next couple of weeks. But in this program, our participants are producing something called Transformative Research and Innovation Proposals, TRIPS, which are imaginary, or real proposals to imaginary funding call, with imaginary €3 million budget. And we're hoping that in working on these proposals in international multidisciplinary themes, people will pick up those transversal skills that kind of we've been talking about. And this really, the activity is structured around these peer mentoring groups that will continue their work over the course of 12 to 14 months. And I would like to hear your opinion on what do you see the role of, how do you see the role of sort of peer mentoring, peer learning, peer support in gaining transversal skills? Who would like to go first?
I can go first again if you want. Because one of the things in terms of learning these skills that I didn't mention sort of in the round before that I did think about when you've asked us the question via email is that if we're talking truly about these transferable skills that also apply outside of academia, like the communication that's been mentioned, I think you should also practice those, or it's a great opportunity to practice those in very different settings as well, which includes committees as part of your like student unions, for example. I started doing this in high school already with event organization, which turns out to be very helpful when you're organizing a conference. And that sort of collaboration, the working with people that is so satisfying or challenging, you learn that outside of academia too. Like, feel free to practice those in the METEOR setting, but also in your everyday life in other ways that you can sort of engage with them. And when it comes to then peer mentoring, peer support, aiding in these skills, I think they mostly are, as we mentioned before, through everyday practice taught and learned. So the peer support that you have, the interactions that you have with them, offer you the opportunities to practice that more than anything, more than a particular program, maybe.
Who would like to pick up from there? Johanna, please.
I also want to share this one example from my previous community, that their doctoral researchers within the same faculty but across research groups created a peer group, and they gathered together, decided the topics, what they wanted to talk about. Sometimes it was the new technical SISU system, where to put the credits, or how difficult it's to do the personal study plan there, or it could be something about very like research intensive issues, that how to write the epistemological chapter to my work. But always it was like two doctoral researchers who were in charge of like inviting people and organizing meetings, and they get study credits from that. So also this kind, I know that some universities also give study credits from being in responsible positions in student unions and so on. And I really like that approach, that these are kind of extracurricular activities, but really useful in terms of the transversal skills. But then I would like to bring another perspective of this learning by doing, and I have also worked quite a lot with heterogeneous study groups, and people really learn a lot from each other. And we really learn a lot from our own supervisors and own teachers, but there is also a risk that we just repeat also the bad manners and bad habits, and we learn wrong things. And I think in that sense it's also important to think that do we need something else than just reflection and sharing experiences? What type of, do we have some reading material, good examples, lectures, some teaching? Now I come back to this teaching at university. I do not believe that people learn to be really good teachers and supervisors at universities if they don't have any knowledge on how people learn, or what is good supervision like. That you also need some knowledge with which to reflect with your group. So that's my perspective.
Okay. Would anybody else like to pick up from that?
I was thinking about, again, from my own experiences, what have I learned through sort of peer activities and peer mentoring? And the first thing that came to mind was how wonderful it is when people, maybe at a peer sort of relationship, can more freely, somehow genuinely encourage one another and be delighted for one another, and also dare to ask maybe some difficult questions about how something is understood. So maybe it comes to writing the epistemological chapter or something, but really daring to somehow explore ideas in a way that maybe with somebody who's seen as a senior, it's a bit harder to do than that. So the peer sort of setting sort of opens up possibilities, and the joy of kind of then pursuing something together and then looking back and being able to see, actually, yes, we have moved forward in what we can do and what we know. But I was also thinking that with peers, you often have maybe in writing articles together and you've agreed you're going to do something and then somebody's actually not doing their part. I think this connects with what Ian was saying. And at what point do you think, okay, I'm going to have to say something to them? As in, where is that bit that you promised? And are you going to then step up and do it yourself, or are you going to ask somebody else to do it? So somehow keeping an eye on the overall process, the overall agreement that you have between, and daring to kind of bring difficult moments back to the table again. Okay, we had this plan. This is what we were going to do, but it's not taking shape as we thought we were going to. Well, then the worst case scenario is that somebody goes on holiday and you can't get in touch with them and they were supposed to have done something. And then you have to decide, okay, well, is this so important to me that I'm now going to use some of my holiday maybe, or some of my time that was supposed to be for something else? Or am I going to let it go even? So somehow I think this is quite an important skill, to be able to decide how much to invest, when to stop investing, and how to then call other people in a way to account, which we have to do if we're in a joint project together. Well, it's not particularly easy, but I think that the peer situation is easier to deal with that and to try this a little bit.
So I just want to say something about the peer learning and teaching situation. So in my opinion, the peer learning is not better, but more comfortable than learning from your teachers or professors. That's the important thing for me, and because you can learn better from your friend. That's why all the students are studying together to the exams, or if they don't understand something in the class, in the lecture, they can ask their friend easily. So it's easy to ask your friend than ask your teacher or professor. So peer learning is a good thing at that point. And as a student or as a person other than a teacher, if you teach something to your other colleague or friend in the school, it gives you some experience on teaching. So it's also a better thing. So it works both ways, learning and teaching, peer-to-peer or person-to-person other than the teachers. So I think that's the important point for me, and it helped a lot to me when I was working with my friend. As a group, it's the same thing, but I totally agree with your thoughts. Working with the group and the challenges are the same, but peer learning and peer teaching helps a lot to develop your learning skills and also teaching skills.
Ian, do you also want to? No? Okay. You agree. Perfect. How about then we have time for, let's take one question from the audience now. Who wants to have a question? No questions? There's one time. Yeah, please do.
I could shout. In the last workshop, I defended my friends that you need to some kind of level up in the process. By the way, in my mind map, in the last one, I exactly written, because I'm directly looking at you, ability to solve problems given enough time. You use the exact same words. That way, coming from a multidisciplinary background, because I'm a chemist, biochemist, I try to combine with machine learning, and I also do advertisement agency work. I do full stack development at the same time, and UI UX designs. So in the commercial world and in the academic world, you need to some kind of leveling up in the process. Start with small clients to international conglomerates, starting with some small work groups to some bigger research groups or some internationally connected interdisciplinary projects. So, what are your opinions about leveling up processes
Brilliant
in
question.
time? Yeah.
Who would like to pick up?
Well, so if I understand the question correctly, like how do we view leveling up, or how do we think we should level up? Like, what are the steps of leveling up? Yeah. So if I reflect on how I've so far leveled up, I don't know if I've done it very successfully, because my leveling up has been mostly in the number of papers simultaneously, like that I'm the first author of. I currently have 7 in progress. That is way too much and is not sustainable. So I do not recommend that kind of leveling up. But I would say, maybe the people in more senior positions can confirm that, but once you also have a little bit of hopefully comfort of seniority, you level up by asking more complex and time-consuming questions, right? When we don't have to deliver a number of papers every year for the stage of the career we're at. Maybe that's one way of leveling up. And my maybe most successful level up has been expanding my network. I have a very multinational network of researchers, collaborators, friends, that has grown exponentially since the sort of end of my PhD, that I think is maybe, as an early career researcher, one of the best level ups that you can have, rather than your papers. Your network, I think, is far more important than the number of papers that you produce.
Thank you. Johanna also wanted to comment.
Yes, I think it was a really good question and a really good perspective, but I think it shouldn't make you like too scary for the future, that, oh no, what I should be able to do and so on. Looking back now, I think that I have quite exceptional career track, so that I didn't never plan to be a professor. But then when I look back, that okay, there were some places where I pushed my boundaries and I did something that was interesting, and that led me to something else, and then broadening something. And already when you are here now, I think you have leveled up. You are not just doing your PhD in your small tiny faculty in somewhere in a small tiny safe space. You are meeting people from other countries, other disciplines, and now you are, if you are now PhD researchers, after 15 years, you may have a colleague professor who was here, and you met here, and you grew up together, and you had some small connections discussing about this plan, what you need to do here, and then finally you may be doing some horizon application together. So in a way that I think it comes through time. So that's really good. You are here.
Ian.
Yeah, I just like the word leveling up. Because of course I could ask you what you mean by that. When I hear somebody talking about leveling up, there is something behind that. You know, it comes to me as, it makes me sit up, get your shit together, take responsibility, don't blame others all the time, level up. That's where I see it. But maybe, of course, in this setting, we're talking about it as whether you talk about it in leveling up with respect to publications, but I see leveling up as well as being the same as taking responsibility. And of course, as a PhD student, you're not going to get all of the responsibility put on you. So the universe, not from a physics perspective, it gives you what you can handle. And the more, of course, that you agree to level up, the more that you take ownership and responsibility, the more you will be given. And you will be tested. And you will be tested, your boundaries will be pushed, and you will feel uncomfortable. And now I am a director of the facility this year, and I've taken 2.5 years to think, do I want that position, and where is that wanting coming from? And it was partly because I was observing in senile meetings, I call it senile meetings, senior people, I didn't agree with the way things were being done. It's not that things were being done wrong, but there was a lack of communication. People were not using their voice. They were not being given a place for their voice. And I thought, okay, there's no point in me complaining about it, because that doesn't change anything. So I, over 2 years, leveled up. And I decided that this year I'm ready to take that responsibility and that kind of challenge. And I wonder, has anybody got my back? I hope so. But I know that, of course, I take responsibility. And I think that it's just a process of leveling up. And it is really good for people to do that. It's okay to be afraid, but don't let fear stop you from pushing those boundaries, because fear is, I mean, I'm sorry to say, fear is a bit of an illusion. It's something that we tell ourselves to protect ourselves. And it's very good, you know, if you're living 1,000 years ago and you're going to get hunted on the prairie by some tiger. I mean, that might be how we feel some sitting on a panel, you know, oh my goodness, the tiger's in the audience. But somehow, you know, it's listen to that, and but don't let it stop you. So, level up. It's a very nice term.
What about Bahadir?
Yeah, I want to say something from the multidisciplinary perspective, as you said, I think, because I'm in the same position. I was in the same position. I'm still on my trip. So when you are a multidisciplinary scientist or researcher, whatever you are, the main problem is the acceptance, being accepted by the others. But you don't, for me or for my situation, to level up my multidisciplinary skills, I didn't afraid to work with other people. I didn't focus only on my major, not on just chemistry. If someone asked me, of course, I had an advantage because of my digital skills, like a computer programming and coding skills. So people comes to you and want something from you about computer or help in the computer things. So I didn't afraid. I didn't say. Of course, sometimes I said no, but most of the time I said yes. I can work with you, and I agree with your thoughts, because if they give you enough time, you can solve any problem, I think. So also, don't afraid, no fear from anything. That's a good thing, and it helped me a lot. So it's opened me too many doors and too many positions, because you had an experience when you work with the other people. Even for the small projects, it doesn't matter. If you can do it, just do it. It will add your skills, and believe me, if you don't get any benefits at that time, commercially or in other way, it will help you in the future. You're gonna see that. So it helped me a lot. It's what I see, what I lived. So for multidisciplinary perspective, you have to do anything you are interested in, other than your main field. Don't be afraid.
Okay, Josephine, leveling up.
Yeah, leveling up. I think that, well, maybe, just trying to think how to frame it, but I think pursuing different kinds of opportunities and maybe creating opportunities as well. So if I think about the people that I have really benefited from working with, it happened because I made an effort to somehow connect with them. Maybe I had read some very interesting papers from somebody, and then I decided to send an email to them and to actually establish some kind of connection with them. Or then I remember attending one of the a national conference, and the keynote speaker was super interesting, and he happened to then be presenting in a session where I was also presenting, and then taking the time to talk afterwards. And then you see over time these relationships and networks begin to take shape that you would never, or I never thought would have been possible. And then I found, for example, that the big conferences, the big international conferences can be super interesting but also quite overwhelming. But the special interest group conferences where real specialists come together and you can hear them talking and you can enter into their conversations as well is somehow I don't know whether accelerator is the right, but it's somehow just so nourishing, so very enriching in your own network. So somehow looking for opportunities, pursuing opportunities, and then making some choices as to whether this is the one really to go for, because you can't be everywhere all the time. But that's what I was thinking for.
Thank you. We're coming to the end of our allotted time. But I'd like to ask all of the panelists to give a brief, you have 1 minute each, like a brief final advice to the participants here on anything that we've talked about so far, like the most crucial, most core thing to remember. Shall we go from there? Bahadir first.
Okay, so I don't want to preach, but I want to give some advice from my experience, actually. So don't hesitate to listen people from the other fields. So that's the important part. And everything they say, I'm sure you have something to get or add into your skills. Whatever field is that. It can be an education field, it can be I don't know, any carpentry, anything. So don't afraid to pay, or don't hesitate to listen to people. Don't turn your back on the people. And develop your social skills, communication skills, and try to express yourself to the people. And what can I say? And work multidisciplinary. Really, it's really good. You know, it's necessary, I think, on these days. One discipline, one field, is not enough, or it's really keeps you in your box. You know, you need to go out of the box.
Josephine.
Yeah, I think my thoughts resonate very much with what you were saying about being open-minded, having the courage, being ready to listen and to open to different kinds of relationships that will then maybe form into greater partnerships, or will just maybe be key moments of prompt sort of thinking, oh, I hadn't anticipated that, but actually that's caught my attention and I can spend some time thinking about it. And new possibilities begin to open up. So, yeah, I think being open-minded and daring to step outside is good.
What about Ian?
Yes, I think everything that's been said so far, I would completely agree with and support. Take as much joy from everything that you're doing. I mean, even the things that you don't want to do, try to find, I mean, don't look for joy in them, but just do it with joy if you can. And say yes to as many opportunities. I mean, clearly you're sitting here, so you must have said yes to coming here, as we've already mentioned. So this is really important. And then later on, when you can afford to say no, you know, learn to say no. I remember somebody had said, yeah, don't blindly follow your supervisor. So, take recommendations and advice from people with a pinch of salt and learn from your own experience and find your own balance, because somebody's balance might be 90%, 10%, and yours is 50-50. There is no right or wrong, but just don't turn your back on life. I mean, and keep going when things are challenging, and they will be challenging. There is no getting out of it, but they are also, through that challenge, you will find great doors opening that you didn't expect. So I know that nowadays, when younger people, especially it seems nowadays, there's so much worry about careers and the future. And I know that's a real worry, but don't let it take you away from what you have at the present moment, because the doors will open for you, absolutely. But if you are forever worrying about the future, you will kind of miss what is right in front of you. So just enjoy the journey, because it's, yep.
Thank you. Things get more and more difficult as the people at this end of the row will need to come up with new things or new ways of saying, I support what the previous people have said. So, Patty.
I would like to tie some things together that we've said in terms of leveling up, taking responsibility. I think the key part of that is knowing, where do you want to go? Do you want to stay in academia? Do you want a postdoc, a professorship? Then let your supervisors and even your peers know, because people in general want to help you get there. The most rewarding part of our jobs is helping students do something they want to do. So if you know what you want, let the people that can help you know, and you're much more likely to actually get there. And if you don't know what you want, that is also something to let your supervisors and mentors know, because that's what they're there for as well. Even if we don't always consider ourselves to have that responsibility, we do. So basically, everyone have a meeting with your supervisors next week and discuss what you want and how to get there.
What about Johanna?
Yes, and continuing from that, if you do not want to stay in the academia and you want to, for example, work as an expert in a company, perhaps then this type of entrepreneurial skills like entrepreneurship, that kind of things could be more valuable than in the academia. Of course, we still have this mindset. But what I would like to say to you is that test your boundaries and potential. And if that is too scary for you, imagine the worst situation it can result. And if you can live with that, then try. But still, I would like to say that academic community at least has a space for so many different type of personalities. So I think it's much more tolerant than many other working places. So if you are introvert, you do not need to change to be extrovert. So you can learn to communicate and interact in your own way and find your own like way of doing these things. So there is space for all types of personalities still.
You might remember yesterday that our director, Taina Saarinen, described herself as a highly functioning introvert. And I think her story is also kind of like a, an indication that different types of roles and personalities can be very, very valuable to academia. My own, what I was thinking I was going to say here at this point is that if somebody is asking you while you're sitting in a taxi on the way to Frankfurt Airport, if somebody is asking you if you want to be part of a Horizon application around doctoral education, then say yes. But maybe, like now listening to Ian, I should probably say something about learning to say no, which is something I haven't learned yet. But thank you for the panelists.